So, since both Amitabh and Mr. Seshagiri have shared their ideas and suggestions in the panel discussion that just got concluded, we are not going their presentations. But I would like to invite Mr. N. Sivaselam on stage. So Mr. N. Sivaselam, as I was saying, again needs no introduction for the telecom fraternity. The kind of role that he has played in the time when he was the Special Secretary Telecom, I think is everybody's knowledge. The role that he played in terms of guiding the telecom industry, guiding the telecom ecosystem, and making sure that all the plans, all the vision that was being prepared was connected to the ground. I think that's been really, really commendable. Although he has moved into a new role now, but what we have been hearing since morning is that telecom itself will not be as critical and as interesting as the kind of impact it will have on a lot of other sectors. And I think several examples that were given in the morning were from the logistics area and the kind of transformation that telecom has been able to bring about. So it's really indeed my pleasure, the pleasure of the telecom fraternity to be able to recognize Mr. N. Sivaselam, and Telecom Sector Skill Council is delighted to present the Mentorship Award on Mr. N. Sivaselam, and I would like to request General Co-Chair to kindly present the award to Mr. Sivaselam. I would now like to invite Mr. Sivaselam to say a few words. Mr. Sivaselam.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you, General Co-Chair. Thanks to Voice and Data, all sponsors. Several of them I have worked with very, very closely during the period when I was in telecom. And some of them I continue to work even when I have left telecom and carrying the learnings in telecom into other spheres, particularly logistics, where I work today. When I was told that I should be giving a speech based on the recognition as for the Manthan Award for the mentorship, I was a bit surprised because I never thought that one is given an award for doing something which is not even original. And that was, and therefore events like these and talks like these can be a little embarrassing for me because it appears that I would be claiming credit for what is a Manthan. And Manthan is actually a collective enunciation of any idea or a jointly developed idea. And there is nothing which I would say this has been original. But yes, there has been certain aspects which I might have contributed as part of a group which on a standalone basis would have made no sense. So to that extent, I'm grateful to the entire fraternity, to the experts, to the industry, to all of you who work in the sector, who have found this contribution in the Manthan useful to carry things forward. I would say that I'm indebted to all of you for the recognition. I see a lot of people who are mentors in their own right, and nothing wrong in admitting that they have been instrumental in mentoring me too, as I developed teeth in the sector 4 years ago. Professor Goyal is there. the ubiquitous person whom you can never miss in the telecom sector, and who is always there lending a helping hand and trying to see that one is better off tomorrow than what is today. He's also here. Can't forget Sheshagiri Rao, a technical person who was my go-to man whenever I wanted. It has matured. It's 4 years old, and they are doing a lot. I mean, it's just 4 years old, and they were already benchmarking it against the Telecom Sector Skill Council. And that's the progress which Telecom Sector Skill Council, through the efforts of all of you in the industry and support of all of you in the industry, has managed to achieve. It's already being cited as a benchmark. And I had the privilege of seeing it when we developed the packages, or what they call the qualification packs, for the Logistics Sector Skill Council. I recall vividly when in early 2016, General Kocher used to speak about qualification packs, and I didn't know what they were. Those qualification packs generally went through a whole lot of iterations and saw the light of the day. But future, those Logistics Sector Skill Council, those sector skill councils, like the logistics one, which I'm associated with presently, didn't need to go through those manthan. They had a template on which they could rely. And yes, that's what manthan does. You just create a template for others to do better. And I'm sure that Logistics Sector Skill Council will leave templates for others to exceed, and that's what goals generally do. I'm grateful to you for all the support this industry has given me in my learning, and also gave simultaneously an opportunity to pay back. I thought during the talk here today, I will lay down some ideas for the future, which will interest you, and on which I think a future template of the telecom industry could be based. Yes, they are all based on our inputs and suggestions from various industry forum, which I attend regularly. I continue to do so even in the Logistics Sector Skill Council, in the logistics sector, which has almost 45 associations. Can you believe it? Even if I see them twice a week, I complete, once a week I complete a year. So you just imagine the type of interactions which I might be having in the logistics sector. But the ground has been prepared in the previous 4 years with all of you. My first talk is on the National Logistics, National Telecommunications Policy, which has been released, and I was fortunate to be associated with it. But yes, it's a manthan document. If at all there is anything which can be stated about telecom policy, is that it is a co-created one. There was nothing in that policy which has not been discussed threadbare in the public domain. And that's the beauty of the policy, because its implementation will be shared by everybody. And that's where I think we need to make a quick and an effective start. There are also issues based on that telecommunications policy is the 5G roadmap, which proceeded simultaneously. That's also a very important a roadmap, and can be considered as the first action plan based on the telecommunications policy. Why I say so is, considering that the telecommunications policy is a futuristic policy, its immediate action lies in how are we going to cope with the 5G regime. As was mentioned by Ibrahim, I'm just returning from a conference of the auto sector, and it was Smart Auto. It was also multidisciplinary. It combined 3 sectors. We talk of multimodality in logistics, but it's there everywhere. in the auto, it was an auto conference, and they spoke about smart auto and smart manufacturing. So they were combining not just auto, they were combining manufacturing, and they were combining IT, but IT with a difference. It's no longer IT, it's IoT, and 5G is all about IoT. And that's what is the change which application makes to the sector as a whole. 5G brings into place a whole lot of application technologies. And application technologies have got their own ecosystems, and you need to be nurturing new ecosystems. When you talk of new ecosystems, the way of doing business in 5G would fundamentally need to be different from the way business was done in relation to something up to 4G. The first we start off is the spectrum. Now, it's very key. It's a key element of 5G. And unless and until we quickly get into an aspect of what you call shared platforms for spectrum, we might find ourselves a bit constrained in our movement towards 5G. 5G does not looks at what I would call ubiquitous spectrum capabilities, unlike access spectrum, which means that if I use it, you cannot use it. And there are limited players who can actually be contracted to use it. Unlike that, 5G spectrums need to be ubiquitous. And when we talk of ubiquitous, there can be millions of people working on it in a non-interfering manner. And spectrums like these do exist. You have the E and the V bands, which are fundamental for 5G, and they need to be available in the public domain. If 5G and IoT, especially when I say 5G, I would largely look at the application-based systems, which are crucial for 5G implementation, because it's going to be niche. You want something, in the previous talk we were talking, it was mentioned that if you want something, it can always be tailored. And that's what 5G does. If it was happening earlier, it was happening as an exception, as an opportunity. In 5G, it'll happen as a rule, and that's what is the difference. What happens as a rule sets the benchmark and the framework. And this is particularly important to note, the change in the 5G ecosystems in terms of getting niche, in transforming the niche into mainstream. With spectrums being important and ubiquitous spectrum being made available publicly, there is also something similar to what happened in the 5G gigahertz band. I think in the mid of 2018, I think the government deal provided for ubiquitous use almost 550 megahertz of spectrum, which makes this country the largest, the country with the largest publicly available access in 5 gigahertz, which is 605 megahertz. I was told, I'm subject to correction, at the time when it was done, even US had only 550 megahertz of spectrum, and we have 605. So it opens up a whole aspect of capabilities down there. Why it is important is what makes business sense. When we are talking of applications, a whole lot of applications need to be structured at the ground, and they require a platform. And that platform maybe is the spectrum, is the easy availability of free spectrum. And unless and until you do that, you don't have capability which will develop on the ground. A whole lot of ecosystems which in our country we call it the startups. Now the startup ecosystem is the way to go about. Not that we will be perennially remaining startups. How the startup ecosystem works, let me recollect it for you. Not that any of you would require my erudition to understand the concept, but I'm only trying to point it out that in a startup ecosystem, you start small. You start off with a problem to address, and that's a niche. That's a niche. There are hundreds of people working in collateral or coexisting systems. Then those niches, somebody is there to coordinate or fuse those niches, and thereby the startups, multiple startups, upscale. Then the process, when it becomes a sizable mass for the purposes of upscaling, the startups coalesce into a unit, and that is how the integration takes place. And once they get integrated, you get into a new, multiple niches get created, and you have a new ecosystem. So it is something like, I would, in the scientific parlance, I compare it to fusion, not fission. It is fusion. It's like creating a hydrogen bomb. And if you create a fusion-related structures, you have a much more energy, and because the energy is preserved in those creations, unlike in fission where they dissipate a lot. Whereas these things, and all what I'm trying to say is, innovation gets fueled through startups, and startups require a particular form of ecosystem which is different from what is prevailing today, and the starts need to be made there. And therefore, as part of this, Manthan, it's my submission that we need to get these two, if you want to get people like you, technologically sound, willing to experiment, willing to take failures, but treating each failures as experiments to actually deliver on the ground, I think the determination on the way we organize our spectrum-related issues becomes crucial. And with a new government in place, we should be, but definitely with a minister who knows the fundamentals and who also looks at law, I think this is an issue to be addressed sooner rather than later, because these systems will evolve fast, and India has to join that race, both not just in the software, IoT, application-related space, but also on the manufacturing-related space. And I can tell you with my participation in the 5G ecosystem arena, we are in a process of creation of the 5G ecosystem in India itself. We have institutions which can design the chip. The question is whether we are willing to put them to work, and that requires people like you to make it happen. IIT, and a lot of you have access to the director and the team out there. They already have the 5G chip, and it's worthwhile for several of you to start working around that chip to make things happen. There are also colleagues among us who have designed a 5G capable chip coming from the software side. Foreign companies are willing to leverage, but I'm not too sure whether Indian companies are yet willing to leverage on those. Sankhya Labs is one of them, and there are 4 or 5 others who require your support in terms of applications to leverage those things. South Koreans are leveraging on them, Americans are leveraging on them, and those who don't want to go hardware side, they are looking at these options. And there are wonderful opportunities for this, because the one which you go on the software side actually can take you to 5G plus, depending upon how you develop your applications. And I think before a month before I left the telecom sector, there was a talk I was told among the 3GPP members who actually decide things as to when we should start talking on 6G discussions. Now, people were already talking about it, so I'm aware of it a month before I left, that the group which constitutes 3GPP We're actually talking about 6G. And what should be the ecosystem which defines 6G? So talk has already started. The beauty about this is we are also members of 3GPP. Industry is represented through in 3GPP. It is the industry's it is in industry's representation where we also get a representation, not only locally but in India, but also internationally, and therefore we work very closely with that ecosystem. But the key element of that thing is things are beginning to happen, and we need to shape our external decision-making parameters to make things happen for the core tech guys in our system, because they are the people who have to make it happen. The third and the last one, which I will address before I conclude, is on the issue of what is the learnings, and what are the learnings for youngsters to go about in this ecosystem. And Ibrahim, where are you? You had specially requested me to speak on this, and I must say that I did some preparation after this request, and tried to structure this presentation to you to address leading up to this finale on what I would expect future on training and to be. I'm not looking at core learnings at institutions about which you heard from so eloquently from the AICTE. I'm actually looking at something which is beyond. It's not that I don't say that these ideas are of original nature, but it is definitely, it is also a manthan in my participation in the 5G forums and hearing, almost 500 of you individually. I mean, it can be a great experience and learning for anybody. I mean, I was fortunate to be there and benefited from it, which I thought I'll share with you. The key element is, it's not, when you are creating the type of technologies which you are looking at, what you require is a base ecosystem. And I'm sorry we don't have that base ecosystem in our country. That starts with, as was explained to me by Professor Paul Raj, who actually mentored all of us in the 5G forum. It was, and also all the professors, I mean, IIT Madras, Indian Institute of Science, Delhi, Abhay Karandikar from now IIT Kanpur, he was there in IIT Bombay, then Professor Desai, all of them. There was a huge discussion which went on for over 6 months, including the former scientific Secretary of Science and Technology, Mr. Ashutosh Sharma. All of us were there. And the discussions went on, and I can only tell you that the final conclusion, we started off with varying positions, but final conclusion was that you require a core group of not 5 people or 10 people, you require a core group of more than 1,000 people who would be having capability to not just software design the chip, but also on the hardware side. Unfortunately, as a country, we have not been able to provide that expertise. We missed it out in the early 2G regime when establishing a chip foundry would be about $2 to $5 billion. We missed that. Around 3G, it was about $6 to $7 billion. We also missed that. Around 4G, it was around $10 billion, and we missed that. We are now in this state, and it's about $15 billion. Now, as a country, I think it's not too great to invest in it. when we say invest in it, we need to the ecosystem development will cost that much. Even then, we would require a core group of people actually soiling their hands in it before we are able to say, before we are able to have that group mentoring in a forum like this to say, okay, this is the way we go forward. Presently, we don't have that support structures among us, and we are not able to provide that support structures to several of you who would actually want it. I think that is an area of key development. They're not low-hanging fruits. I mean, training in a university would, according to me, be a low-hanging fruit. But this is not a one. This requires an ecosystem generation. It requires industry voice to make it happen, to say that India must do it. And I know that Indians can do it. There are a whole lot of Indians outside, and they are feared, because people feel that these guys can actually have the experience. So they're actually having a problem. India is not doing it. Outsiders, they are wary of Indians. With the result, those tech guys are finding it difficult. And I know several of them who would be willing to put their life at stake, but create the chip for India. That's the type of passionate guys who are there, and we need to tap them. But we need to tap them with some sort of an investment, and some. It's not some sort of it's a reasonable investment. But we need to trust them, and the country to lay their faith in them. For all of us to put our concentric circles to support that sort of a development. I thought Manthan should look at that rather sincerely and strongly, because it shouldn't so happen that we don't have that learning experience to create that ecosystem. And when I'm talking of creating those ecosystems, trust me, I'm not talking India exclusive. In fact, I would always argue against non-exclusivity in any manufacturing. I would always promote global change, because global change is a risk insurance. If you develop everything internally, if somebody does better than you, your losses are 100%. You have to write off your investments. But being part of global change ensures that if something progressive is discovered, your participation in the global chain ensures that you have advanced knowledge, and secondly, you are in a position to put that investment, which everybody would actually do. That's what support and participation in something like 3GPP brings to the table. Not just our participation as a technology provider or a technology supporter, but also use cases, knowledge about experimentation, and also an ability to reduce risk in areas where we are developing. And this is a very important thing which I thought I'll cover as part of this. And we need to get our people working on this sooner rather than later. A small second point on that thing from the Sector Skill Council. I think over the last 2 years has been pretty tough for the telecom industry. And we didn't feel too much of a pinch. And one of the reasons, I would say, the soft underbelly of that was actually the Telecom Sector Skill Council, because we could put a whole lot of people, and the industry supported a whole lot of people for retraining. And that great support from the Telecom Skill Council will always go unnoticed, because the Skill Council is now part of the ecosystem itself. It's not something promoted by the ecosystem. It has joined the ranks of the ecosystem. And it is very important for the Sector Skill Council to look forward as the 5G regime unfolds itself. A whole lot of local niche developments will take place, and which will require skilling at a totally different level, several of which we cannot envisage, or we put it positively, all of us would be limited by our own imagination in understanding what is going to be that ecosystem or the skills which would be required at that position. I think I will end that with these words. I'm really grateful to you for having listened to me, as you have always done, and extended me the courtesy once again for being with you here today. Thanks a lot, and I'm extremely indebted to you for the honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and as I said, Mr. Sivasalam's address never disappoints. I think his point about the ecosystem in this space and the role it will play in training and learning, and an ecosystem with a global footprint, I think is a very, very important point. And I'm sure it will give us a lot of thinking and food for thought as we go back. Mr. Sivasalam, one small request. Can I request you to present mementos of appreciation to our previous speakers? Can I invite on stage Mr. Sheshagiri Rao, Chairman and MDs TCIL. Mr. Arun Karna, Managing Director and CEO of AT&T India. Mr. N.K. Goyal, Chairman of Telecom Equipment Manufacturers Association. Mr. Sandeep Bhargav, Mr. Sandeep Bhargav, Executive Vice President, Corporate Affairs and Public Policy with Vodafone Idea. And Mr. Amitabh Nag, Head of Public Sector and Strategic Alliances with HP. Is Deepak around by any chance? Oh, Deepak has left. Thank you, Mr. Sivasalam, and congratulations for the award. With that, we conclude the first half of the Telecom Manthan today. We have a lunch break, and we also have the stalls, as I mentioned to you. Various stalls are there outside. Kindly visit the stalls when you are having your lunch outside. And again, to catch back on our schedule, I would request all of you to try and be back in the hall in the next 30 minutes. Please try and be back in the hall in the next 30 minutes. And we have a very interesting panel discussion followed by the Telecom Manthan Awards. We have a very interesting panel discussion followed by the Telecom Manthan Awards. I request all of you to please be back in the room in the next 30 minutes. Thank you.